time has moved considerably fast since the last time we were home. So, just to check our thoughts, the major update is, when will I have discovered every part of the cave? I have explored every part of the cave. So, we have now, at last, crossed that milestone. What else is there that we could cross off? Oops. Oh, there was another accomplishment. My dream would be to find a book that never ends. It's not crossed off yet, however, we did find that book. And just looking at the rest, it's all crossed out. It seems we're approaching the end, and yeah, that's fair. But there's still more to be done. There's still more to discover. So, let's take a look at our new books real quick. Lots more Monte Cristo. Before, we only had Volume 1, and the Shade has already read it. So, he's probably looking forward to reading these others. And we will let him. But, there it is. The Never-Ending Notebook. All work, no play. Make Shade a dull boy. Yeah. That's a lesson to be learned. Poe's Poems. Oh, we've done it. The Secret of the Moss Carpet. It is I, dear reader, who have discovered an old and forgotten art. The art of moss weaving. The instructions are as simple as they are effective. Simply take a bunch of moss. I recommend 12 evenly sized clumps. Braid together their natural fibers, one thread at a time. Skinny, bony fingers are best for this kind of work. One cannot but fail with this kind of sausage figures prevalent in this day and age. Now, once you have braided enough, add another layer of moss on top. Intertwine that, same manner as the layer below. But now, braid only every second thread. In this way, you can create an irregular pattern that will be more stable. Following this procedure, let the moss rest. And maybe yourself too. You have successfully created moss carpet. So, the interesting detail here is the person who wrote it, they're very well aware of their sausage fingers. And it's very different than perhaps someone like the Shade, who would have the skinny, bony fingers. Fun little detail. Let's see if that's... it wouldn't be that one that's done it, but having opened the Never-Ending Notebook, why does it keep pushing me back to the top? No, it's not crossed out yet. It will. I think today, when we end the stream, we'll let the Shade start reading that book. But in books to finish, I think we will finish this book today. Chapter 40. Wow, I've never actually come across or read the Roman numeral for 5. I'm guessing it's L, and the X before it. Yeah, Roman numerals are weird. Just trust me, it's 40. There is an isle in the sea. Great events. There is an isle in the sea, not far from the happy isles of Zarathustra, in which a volcano ever smoketh, of which isle the people, and especially the old woman amongst them, say it is placed as a rock before the gate of the netherworld, but that, through the volcano itself, the narrow way leadeth downwards, which conducteth to this gate. Now, about the time that Zarathustra sojourned on the Happy Isles, it happened that a ship anchored at the isle on which standeth the smoking mountain, and the crew went ashore to shoot rabbits. Rabbits live around volcanoes? Well, they can live wherever they want, I guess. About the noontime hour, however, when the captain and his men were together again, they saw suddenly a man coming towards them through the air, and a voice said distinctly, "It is time! It is the highest time!" But when the figure was nearest to them, it flew past quickly, however, like a shadow, in the direction of the volcano. Then did they recognize with the greatest surprise that it was Zarathustra, for they had all seen him before except the captain himself, and they loved him as the people love, in such wise that love and awe were combined in equal degree. "Behold," said the old helmsman, "there goes Zarathustra to hell." About the same time that these sailors landed on the Fire Isle, there was a rumor that Zarathustra had disappeared, and when his friends were asked about it, they said that he had gone on board a ship by night, without saying whither he was going. Thus, there arose some uneasiness. After 3 days, however, there came the story of the ship's crew in addition to this uneasiness. And then did all the people say that the devil had taken Zarathustra. His disciples laughed, sure enough, at this talk. One of them said, "Even sooner would I believe that Zarathustra had taken the devil." But at the bottom of their hearts, they were all full of anxiety and longing. So their joy was great when on the 5th day Zarathustra appeared amongst them. And this is the account of Zarathustra's interview with the fire dog. "The earth," said he, "hath a skin, and this skin hath diseases. One of these diseases, for example, is called man, and another of these diseases is called the fire dog. Concerning him, men have greatly deceived themselves, and let themselves be deceived. To fathom this mystery did I go o'er the sea, and I have seen the truth naked, verily, barefooted up to the neck. Now do I know how it is concerning the fire dog, and likewise concerning all the spouting and subverse devils, of which not only old women are afraid. Up with thee, fire dog, out of thy depth, cried I, and confess how deep that depth is. Whence cometh that which thou snortest up? Thou drinkest copiously at the sea. That doth thine embittered eloquence betray. In sooth, for a dog of the depth, thou takest thy nourishment too much from the surface. At the most, I regard thee as the ventriloquist of the earth. And ever, when I have heard subversive and spouting devils speak, I have found them like thee, embittered, mendacious, and shallow. Ye understand how to roar, and obscure with ashes. Ye are the best braggarts, and have sufficiently learned the art of making dregs boil. Where are ye? There must always be dregs at hand, and much that is spongy, hollow, and compressed. It wanteth to have freedom. Freedom, ye all roar most eagerly, but I have unlearned the belief in great events, when there is much roaring and smoke about them. And believe me, friend Hullabaloo, the greatest events are not our noisiest, but our stillest hours. Not around the inventors of new noise, but around the inventors of new values. Doth the world revolve inaudibly? It revolveth, and just, own to it, little had ever taken place when thy noise and smoke passed away. What if a city did become a mummy, and a statue lay in the mud? And this do I say also to the overthrowers of statues. It is certainly the greatest folly to throw salt into the sea, and statues into the mud. In the mud of your contempt lay the statue, but it is just its law that out of contempt its life and living beauty grow again. With diviner features doth it now arise, seducing by its suffering, and verily, it will yet thank you for overthrowing it, ye subverters. This counsel, however, do I counsel to kings and churches, and to all that is weak with age or virtue. Let yourselves be overthrown, that ye may again come to life, and that virtue may come to you. Thus spake I before the fire dog. Then did he interrupt me sullenly, and asked, Church, what is that? Church, answered I, that is a kind of state, and indeed the most mendacious, but remain quiet, thou dissembling dog. Thou surely knowest thine own species best. Like thyself, the state is a dissembling dog. Like thee, doth it like to speak with smoke and roaring, to make believe, like thee, that it speaketh out of the heart of things. For it seeketh, by all means, to be the most important creature on earth, the state, and people think it so. When I had said this, the fire dog acted as if mad with envy. What? Cried he, the most important creature on earth? And people think it so? And so much vapor and terrible voices came out of his throat that I thought he would choke with vexation and envy. At last he became calmer, and his panting subsided. As soon, however, as he was quiet, I said laughingly, Thou art angry, fire dog, so I am in the right about thee, and that I may also maintain the right hear the story of another fire dog. He speaketh actually out of the heart of the earth. Gold doth his breath exhale, and golden rain, so doth his heart's desire. What are ashes and smoke and hot dregs to him? Laughter fitteth from him like a variegated cloud. Adverse is he to thy gargling and spewing and grips in the bowels. The gold, however, and the laughter, these doth he take of the earth, of the heart of the earth, for that thou mayest know it, the heart of the earth is of gold. When the fire dog heard this, he could no longer endure to listen to me. Abashed, did he draw his tail, said bow wow in a cowed voice, and crept down into his cave. Thus told Zarathustra his disciples, however, hardly listened to him. So great was their eagerness to tell him about the sailors, the rabbits, and the flying man. What am I to think of it? Said Zarathustra. Am I indeed a ghost? But it may have been my shadow. You have surely heard something of the wanderer and his shadow. One thing, however, is certain. I must keep a tighter hold of it, otherwise it will spoil my reputation. And once more Zarathustra shook his head and wondered, What am I to think of it? Said he once more. Why did the ghost cry, It is time, it is the highest time. For what is it then? The highest time. Thus spake Zarathustra. Okay, so he met this dog, which was, I guess, some sort of deity, like the Cerberus, to guard the gates to hell. But he found that the Cerberus often left the volcano and went down to the ocean to drink. And he's like, I knew it. You're just like we are. You just huff and puff all smoke, but you have to eat and drink like the rest of us. How could you say you're something other than from the earth? How can you say you're some deity thing when you just make about like a people does? But then he compared this fire dog to Another dog that spews gold. He also compared it to the state. He also compared it to a god, and calls them all basically puffs of smoke, and that they tried to make themselves to be the most important thing. And that when the fire dog realized it, he too kind of admitted that, yep, okay, I'm going to just go tuck my tail and run because I've been called out. But yeah, what is this ghost, this visitor thing? Highest time for what? Taking a drink. Chapter 41. The Soothsayer. I saw a great sadness come over mankind. The best turned weary of their works. A doctrine appeared. A faith ran beside it. All is empty. All is alike. All hath been. And from all hills there re-echoed. All is empty. All is alike. All hath been. To be sure, we have harvested. But why have all our fruits become rotten and brown? What was it fell last night from the evil moon? In vain was all our labor. Poisoned hath our wine become. The evil eye hath singed yellow our fields and hearts. Arid have we all become, and fire falling upon us. Then do we turn dust like ashes. Yea, the fire itself have we made aweary. All our fountains have dried up, even the sea hath receded. All the ground trieth to gape, but the depth will not swallow. Alas, where is there still a sea in which one could be drowned? So soundeth our plaint across shallow swamps. Verily, even for dying, have we become too weary. Now do we keep awake and live on in sepulchres, whatever the word is. Thus did Zarathustra hear a soothsayer speak, and the foreboding touched his heart and transformed him. Sorrowfully did he go about and wearily, and he became like unto those of whom the soothsayer had spoken. Verily, said he unto his disciples, a little while, and there cometh the long twilight. Alas, shall I preserve my light through it, that it may not smother in this sorrowfulness? To remoter worlds shall it be light, and also to remotest nights. Thus did Zarathustra go about grieved in his heart, and for 3 days he did not take any meat or drink. He had no rest, and lost his speech, and at last it came to pass that he fell into a deep sleep. His disciples, however, sat around him in long night watches, and waited anxiously to see if he would wake and speak. And speak again, and recover from his affliction. And this is the discourse that Zarathustra spake when he awoke. His voice, however, came unto his disciples as from afar. Hear, I pray you, the dream that I dreamed, my friends, and help me to divine its meaning. A riddle is it still unto me, this dream. The meaning is hidden in it, and encaged, and doth not yet fly above it on free pinions. All life had I renounced, so I dreamed, night watchman and grave guardian had I become, alone, in the lone mountain fortress of death. There did I guard his coffins. Full stood the musty vaults, and those trophies of victory, out of glass coffins did vanquished life gaze upon me. The odor of dust covered eternities, did I breathe, sultry and dust-covered lay my soul. And who could have aired his soul there? Brightness of midnight was ever around me, lonesomeness cowered beside her, and as a third, death rattle stillness, the worst of my female friends. Keys did I carry, the rustiest of all keys, and I knew how to open with them the most creaking of all gates. Like a bitterly angry croaking ran the sound through the long corridors when the leaves of the gates opened. Ungraciously did this bird cry, unwillingly was it awakened. But more frightful even, and more heart-strangling was it, when it again became silent and still all around, and I alone sat in that malignant silence. Thus did time pass with me, and slip by, if time there still was. What do I know thereof? But at last there happened that which awoke me. Thrice did there peals at the gate, like thunders. Thrice did the vaults resound and howl again. Then did I go to the gate. Alpa, cried I, who carrieth his ashes unto the mountain. Alpa, Alpa, who carrieth his ashes unto the mountain? And I pressed the key and pulled at the gate and exerted myself. Not a finger's breadth was it yet open. Then did a roaring wind tear the folds apart, whistling, whizzing, and piercing. It threw unto me a black coffin, and in the roaring and whistling and whizzing the coffin burst up, and spouted out 1,000 peals of laughter, and 1,000 caricatures of children, angels, owls, fools, and child-sized butterflies laughed and mocked and roared at me. Wait, child-sized butterflies, are we talking about small butterflies in the scale of size of butterflies, or a child, like a person-sized hugeness of butterfly? Child-sized butterflies, but they laughed and mocked. Okay. I suppose it doesn't matter which way we imagine them, perhaps a little of both. Fearfully was I terrified thereby. It prostrated me, and I cried with horror, as I never cried before. But my own crying awoke me, and I came to myself. Thus did Zarathustra relate his dream, and was silent, for as yet he knew not the interpretation thereof. But the disciple whom he loved most arose quickly, seized Zarathustra's hand, and said, Thy life itself interpreteth unto us this dream, O Zarathustra. Art thou not thyself the wind, with shrill whistling, which bursteth open the gates of the fortress of death? Art thou not thyself the coffin full of many-hued malices and angel caricatures of life? Verily, like 1,000 peals of children's laughter, comes Zarathustra into all sepulchres, laughing at those night watchmen and grave guardians, and whoever else rattleth with sinister keys. With thy laughter wilt thou frighten and prostrate them, fainting and recovering will demonstrate thy power over them. And when this long twilight cometh, and a mortal weariness, even then wilt thou not disappear from our firmament, thou advocate of life. You stars hast thou made us see, and you nocturnal glories, verily, laughter itself hast thou spread out over us like a many-hued canopy. Now will children's laughter ever from coffins flow, now will a strong wind ever come victoriously unto all mortal weariness. Of this thou art thyself the pledge and the prophet. Verily, they themselves didst thou dream, thine enemies. That was thy sorest dream. But as thou awokest from them, and camest to thyself, so shall they awaken from themselves, and come unto thee. Thus spake the disciple, and all the others then thronged around Zarathustra, grasped him by the hands, and tried to persuade him to leave his bed and his sadness, and return unto them. Zarathustra, however, sat upright on his couch, with an absent look, like one returning from a long foreign sojourn. Did he look on his disciples, and examine their features, but still he knew them not. When, however, they raised him, and set him upon his feet, behold, all on a sudden his eye changed. He understood everything that had happened, stroked his beard, and said with a strong voice, Well, this hath just its time, but see to it, my disciples, that we have a good repast, and without delay. Thus do I mean to make amends for bad dreams. The soothsayer, however, shall eat and drink at my side, and verily, I will yet show him a sea in which he can drown himself. Thus spake Zarathustra. Then did he gaze long into the face of the disciple who had been the dream interpreter, and shook his head. Shook his head how? Like, no, like, did he shake the disciple's head? I'm assuming Zarathustra shook his own head. But yeah, so he had a dream of what it was like to face against himself if he wasn't himself. That's kind of fun. Chapter 42, Redemption. When Zarathustra went one day over the great bridge, then did the cripples and beggars surround him, and a hunchback spake thus unto him, Behold, Zarathustra, even the people learn from thee, and acquire faith in thy teaching. But for them to believe fully in thee, one thing is still needful. Thou must first of all convince us cripples. Here, hast thou now a fine selection, and verily an opportunity with more than one forelock. The blind canst thou heal, and make the lame run, from him who hath too much behind. Couldst thou well also take away a little, that, I think, would be the right method to make the cripples believe in Zarathustra. Zarathustra, however, answered thus unto him who so spake. When one taketh his hump from the hunchback, then doth one take from him his spirit. So do the people teach. And when one giveth the blind man eyes, then doth he see too many bad things on the earth, so that he curseth him who healed him. He, however, who maketh the lame man run, inflicteth upon him the greatest injury, for hardly could he run, when his vices run away with him. So do the people teach concerning cripples. And why should not Zarathustra also learn from the people, when the people learn from Zarathustra? It is, however, the smallest thing unto me, since I have been amongst men, to see one person lacking an eye, another an ear, and a third a leg, and that others have lost the tongue, or the nose, or the head. I see and have seen worse things, and divers things so hideous, that I should neither like to speak of all matters, nor even keep silent about some of them, namely, men who lack everything, except that they have too much of one thing, men who are nothing more than a big eye, or a big mouth, or a big belly, or something else big. Reversed cripples, I call such men. And when I came out of my solitude, and for the first time passed over this bridge, then I could not trust mine eyes, but looked again, and said at last, That is an ear as big as a man. Maybe they were giant child-sized butterflies. I looked still more attentively, and actually there did move under the ear something that was pitiably small and poor and slim, and in truth this immense ear was perched on a small thin stalk. The stalk, however, was a man. A person putting a glass to his eyes could even recognize further the small, envious countenance, and also that a bloated solet dangled at the stalk. The people told me, however, that the big ear was not only a man, but a great man, a genius. But I never believed in the people when they spake of great men, and I hold to my belief that it was a reversed cripple, who had too little of everything and too much of one thing. When Zarathustra had spoken thus unto the hunchback, and unto those of whom the hunchback was the mouthpiece and advocate, then did he turn to his disciples in profound dejection and said, "Verily, my friends, I walk amongst men as amongst the fragments and limbs of human beings. This is the terrible thing to mine eye, that I find man broken up, and scattered about, as on a battle and butcher ground. And when mine eye fleeth from the present to the bygone, it findeth ever the same, fragments and limbs and fearful chances, but no men. Ah, the present and the bygone upon earth, my friends, that is my most unbearable trouble, and I should not know how to live if I were not a seer of what is to come. A seer, a purposer, a creator, a future itself, and a bridge to the future. And alas, also it is, as it were, a cripple on this bridge. All that is Zarathustra. And ye also asked yourselves often, Who is Zarathustra to us? What shall he be called by us? And like me, did ye give yourself questions for answers? Is he a promiser, or a fulfiller, a conqueror, or an inheritor, a harvest, or a plowshare, a physician, or a healed one? Is he a poet, or a genuine one, an emancipator, or a subjugator, a good one, or an evil one? Walks among men as the fragments of the future which I contemplate. And it is all my poetization and aspiration to compose and collect into unity what is fragment and riddle and fearful chance. How could I endure to be a man if man were not also the composer and riddle reader and redeemer of chance? To redeem what is past and to transform every it was into thus would I have it. That only do I call redemption. Will, so is the emancipator and joy-bringer called. Thus have I taught you, my friends, but now learn this likewise. The will itself is still a prisoner. Willing emancipateth. But what is that called which still putteth the emancipator in chains? It was. Thus is the will's teeth-gnashing and lonesomest tribulation called, impotent towards what it hath been done, towards what hath been done. It is a malicious spectator of all that is past. Not backwards can the will, that it cannot break time and time's desire. That is the will's lonesomest tribulation. Willing emancipateth. What doth willing itself devise in order to get free from its tribulation, and mock at its prison? Ah, the fool becometh every prisoner, foolishly delivereth itself, also the imprisoned will. That time doth not run backwards. That is its animosity. That which was, so is the stone which it cannot roll called. And doth it roll stones out of animosity and ill humour, and taketh revenge on whatever doth not, like it, feel rage and ill humour. Thus did the will, the emancipator, become a torturer, and on all that is capable of suffering it taketh revenge, because it cannot go backwards. This, yea, this alone is revenge itself, the will's antipathy to time, and it was. Verily, a great folly dwelleth in our will, and it became a curse unto all humanity, that this folly acquired spirit, the spirit of revenge. My friends, that hath hitherto been man's best contemplation, and where there was suffering, it was claimed there was always penalty. Penalty, so calleth itself revenge. With the lying word it feigneth a good conscience. And because in the willer himself there is suffering, because he cannot will backwards, thus was willing itself, and all life claimed to be penalty. And then did cloud after cloud roll over the spirit, until at last madness preached, Everything perisheth, therefore everything deserveth to perish. And this itself is justice, the law of time, and he must devour his children. Thus did madness preach. Morally, are things ordered according to justice and penalty? Where is there deliverance from the flux of things, from the existence of penalty? Thus did madness preach. Can there be deliverance when there is eternal justice? Alas, unrollable is the stone. It was. Eternal must also be all penalties. Thus did madness preach. No deed can be annihilated. How could it be undone by the penalty? This is what is eternal in the existence of penalty. That existence also must be eternally recurring deed and guilt. Unless the will should at last deliver itself, and willing become non-willing. But ye know, my brethren, this fabulous song of madness. Away from those fabulous songs did I lead you when I taught you. The will is a creator. All it was is a fragment, a riddle, a fearful chance, until the creating will saith thereto, but thus would I have it. Until the creating will saith thereto, but thus do I will it, and thus shall I will it. But did it ever speak thus, and when doth this take place? Hath the will been unharnessed from its own folly? Hath the will become its own deliverer and joy-bringer? Hath it unlearned the spirit of revenge and all teeth-gnashing? And who hath taught it reconciliation with time, something higher than all reconciliation? Something higher than all reconciliation must the will, in which the will to power. But how doth that take place? Who hath taught it also to will backwards? But at this point in his discourse, it chanced that Zarathustra suddenly paused, and looked like a person in the greatest alarm. With terror in his eyes did he gaze on his disciples, his glances pierced, as with arrows, their thoughts, and airier thoughts. After a brief space, he again laughed, and said soothedly, "It is difficult to live amongst men, because silence is so difficult, especially for a blabberer." Thus spake Zarathustra. The hunchback, however, had listened to the conversation and covered his face during that time. But when he heard Zarathustra laugh, he looked up with curiosity and said slowly, "But why does Zarathustra speak otherwise unto us than unto his disciples?" Zarathustra answers, "What is there to be wondered at? With hunchbacks, one may well speak in a hunchbacked way." "Very good," said the hunchback, "and with pupils one may well tell tales out of school. But why doth Zarathustra speak otherwise unto his pupils than unto himself?" Just reflecting a bit on teeth gnashing, such a weird phrase. I've only heard it before in religious texts, and Zarathustra mentioned some chapters back, a couple of days back, when we were reading, that he wanted to be like a preacher out once upon a time. Then he changed his ways and became wise and made his own path. But I think some of that vernacular, some of those words carry themselves still in him to use such words. Teeth gnashing. It's so weird. 43. Manly prudence. Not the height, It is the declivity that is terrible. The declivity where the gaze shooteth downwards, and the hand graspeth upwards. There doth the heart become giddy through its double will. Friends, do ye divine also my heart's double will? This is my declivity and my danger, that my gaze shooteth towards the summit, and my hand would fain clutch and lean on the depth. To man clingeth my will, with chains do I bind myself to man, because I am pulled upwards to the Superman, for thither doth mine other will tend. And therefore do I live blindingly among men, as if I knew them not, that my hand may not entirely lose belief in firmness. I know not you men. This gloom and consolation is often spread around me. I sit at the gateway for every rogue and ask, who wisheth to deceive me? This is my first manly prudence, that I allow myself to be deceived, so as not to be on my guard against deceivers. If I were on my guard against man, how could man be an anchor to my ball? Too easily would I be pulled upwards and away. This providence is over my fate, that I have to be without foresight. And he, who would not languish amongst men, must learn to drink out of all glasses. And he who would keep clean amongst men must know how to wash himself even with dirty water. And thus spoke I often to myself for consolation, courage, cheer up, old heart, and unhappiness hath failed to befall thee. Enjoy, that is thy happiness. This, however, is mine other manly prudence. I am more forbearing to the vain than to the proud. Is not wounded vanity the mother of all tragedies? Where, however, pride is wounded, there groweth up something better than pride, that life may be fair to behold. Its game must be well played. For that purpose, however, it needeth good actors. Good actors have I found all the vain ones. They play and wish people to be fond of beholding them. All their spirit is in this wish. They represent themselves. They invent themselves. In their neighborhood, I like to look upon life. It cureth of melancholy. Therefore am I forbearing to the vain, because they are the physicians of my melancholy. They keep me attached to man, as to a drama. And further, who conceiveth the full depth of this modesty of the vain man? I am favorable to him, and sympathetic, on account of his modesty. From you would he learn his belief in himself. He feedeth upon your glances, and eateth praise out of your hands. Your lies doth he even believe, when you lie favorably about him. For in its depths sigheth his heart, what am I? And if that be the true virtue, which is unconscious of itself, well, the vain man is unconscious of his modesty. This is, however, my third manly prudence. I am not put out of conceit with the wicked by your timorousness. I am happy to see the marvels the warm sun hatcheth, tigers and palms and rattlesnakes. Also amongst men there is a beautiful brood of the warm sun, and much that is marvelous in the wicked. In truth, as your wisest did not seem to me so very wise, so found I also human wickedness below the fame of it. And oft did I ask with a shake of the head, why still rattle, ye rattlesnakes? Verily, there is still a future even for evil, and the warmest south is still undiscovered by man. How many things are now called the worst wickedness, which are only 12 feet broad and 3 months long? Some day, however, will greater dragons come into the world. For that the Superman may not lack his dragon, the super dragon, that is worthy of him. There must still much, there must, what? This is reading very weird. There must still much warm sun glow on moist virgin forests. Out of your wildcats must tigers have evolved, out of your poison toads, crocodiles, for the good hunter shall have a good hunt. And verily, ye good and just, in you there is much to be laughed at, and especially your fear of what hath hitherto been called the devil. So alien are ye in your souls to what is great, that to you the Superman would be frightful in his goodness. And ye wise and knowing ones, ye would flee from the solar glow of the wisdom in which the Superman joyfully batheth his nakedness. Ye highest men, who have come within my ken, this is my doubt of you, and my secret laughter. I suspect ye would call my Superman a devil. I became tired of those highest and best ones. From their height did I long to be up, out, and away to the Superman. A horror came over me when I saw those best ones naked. Then there grew for me the pinions to soar away into distant futures, into more distant futures, into more southern souths than ever artist dreamed of, thither, where gods are ashamed of all clothes. But disguise, do I want to see you, ye neighbors and fellow men, and well attired and vain and estimable as the good and just. And disguised will I myself sit amongst you, that I may mistake you and myself. For that is my last manly prudence. Thus spake Zarathustra. So I think with clothing, he's not saying like being ashamed of yourself, but that clothing is like a vanity. It's a way to also disguise themselves. I've noticed this, especially with people in video, when they're wearing big suits. If those suits have shoulder pads, often the shoulder pads are used to push the fabric out from the skin, so that way the fabric's looking more vertical to wrap around a big belly that might be there. There's a few actors I can think of that have some mighty big shoulder pads, but he's saying that away from the vanity, looking at how people look at skin value, that they don't need to hide themselves with this clothing, and they're proud of it. So much so that Zarathustra himself was like, this is too great for even me, and he just ran to the hills away from all that. But he's claiming it in the way of his Superman, that the Superman is perfect in this way, that it's just natural to them. Okay. 44. The stillest hour. What hath happened unto me, my friends? Ye see me troubled, driven forth, unwillingly obedient, ready to go. Alas, to go away from you. Yea, once more, must Zarathustra retire to his solitude, but unjoyously, this time doth the bear go back to his cave. What hath happened unto me? Who ordereth this? Mine angry mistress wisheth it so. She spake unto me. Have I ever named her name to you? Yesterday, towards evening, there spake unto me my stillest hour. That is the name of my terrible mistress. And thus did it happen. For everything must I tell you, that your heart may not harden against the suddenly departing one. Do ye know the terror of him who falleth asleep? To the very toes he is terrified, because the ground giveth way under him, and the dream beginneth. This do I speak unto you in parable. Yesterday at the stillest hour did the ground give way under me. the dream began. The hour hand moved on, the timepiece of my life drew breath. Never did I hear such stillness around me, so that my heart was terrified. Then was there spoken unto me without voice, Thou knowest it, Zarathustra. And I cried in terror at this whispering, and the blood left my face. I was silent. Then was there once more spoken unto me without voice, Thou knowest it, Zarathustra, but thou dost not speak it. And at last I answered, like one defiant, Yea, I know it, but I will not speak it. Then was there again spoken unto me without voice, Thou wilt not, Zarathustra. Is this true? Conceal thyself not behind thy defiance. And I wept and trembled like a child and said, I would indeed, but how can I do it? Exempt me only from this. It is beyond my power. Then was there again spoken unto me without voice, What matter about thyself, Zarathustra? Speak thy word and succumb. And I answered, Is it my word? Who am I? I await the worthier one. I am not worthy even to succumb by it. Then was there again spoken unto me without voice, What matter about thyself? Thou art not yet humble enough for me. Humility hath the hardest skin. And I answered, What hath not the skin of my humility endured? At the foot of my height do I dwell. How high are my summits? No one hath yet told me. But well do I know my valleys. Then was there again spoken unto me without voice, O Zarathustra, he who hath to remove mountains removeth also valleys and plains. And I answered, As yet hath my word not removed mountains, and what I have spoken hath not reached man. I went indeed unto man, but not yet have I attained unto them. Then there was again spoken unto me without voice, What knowest thou thereof? The dew falleth on the grass, when the night is most silent. And I answered, They mocked me, when I found and walked in mine own path. Certainly did my feet then tremble. And thus did they speak unto me, Thou forgottest the path before, now dost thou also forget how to walk. Then there was again spoken unto me without voice, What matter about their mockery? What art one who hath unlearned to obey? Now shalt thou command. Thou knowest not who is most needed by all, he who commandeth great things. To execute great things is difficult, but the more difficult task is to command great things. This is my most unpardonable obstinacity. Close to that. I'm not going to try again. Thou hast the power, and thou wilt not rule. And I answered, I lack the lion's voice for all commanding. Then was there again spoken unto me as a whispering, It is the stillest words which bring the storm. Thoughts that come with dove's footsteps guide the world. O Zarathustra, thou shalt go as a shadow of that which is to come. Thus wilt thou command, and in commanding go foremost. And I answered, I am ashamed. Then there again spoken unto me without voice, Thou must yet become a child, and be without shame. The pride of youth is still upon thee. Late hast thou become young, but he who would become a child must surmount even his youth. And I considered a long while, and trembled. At last, however, did I say what I had said at first, I will not. Then did a laughing take place all around me. Alas, how that laughing lacerated my bowels, and cut into my heart. And there was spoken unto me for the last time, O Zarathustra, thy fruits are ripe, but thou art not ripe for thy fruits. So must thou go again into solitude, for thou shalt yet become mellow. And again there was a laughing, and it fled. Then did it become still around me, and with a double stillness I lay, however, on the ground, and the sweat flowed from my limbs. Now have ye heard all, and why I have to return into my solitude. Nothing have I kept hidden from you, my friends, but even this have ye heard from me, who is still the most reserved of men, and will be so. My friends, I should have something more to say unto you. I should have something more to give unto you. Why do I not give it? Am I then a... what? When, however, Zarathustra had spoken these words, the violence of his pain and a sense of the nearness of his departure from his friends came over him, and he wept aloud. No one knew how to console him. In the night, however, he went away alone and left his friends. So I have an idea of how that word is spoken. However, I don't know what I'm saying by saying that. So just because it's similar to other words, is he trying to say that he is ignorant? Should I have something more to say unto you? Why do I not give it? Am I then an ignorant fellow? We'll say that because that's just how we do. Right. So, okay. Something came upon him and brought him to tears that I guess he didn't wish to leave. It's interesting to see Zarathustra having to go through a growth, a change, something in his character that he himself is not delighted with. If he wants to create this ideal of the Superman and bring it within himself, that he's not even attained all of it, that he's not like the wise man who already knoweth all, but he's learning along his way. I hope the next book is not as preachy. How long is the next book? That was 308, 362, and the last one, 380. Okay. I'm thinking, well, time is going much, much faster now. 18 seconds there, 19. That was what, 17? So 17/18 seconds. Wow, time is really moving. So even though we're not yet at 200 days, I don't think the days ahead of us are going to be very long. So it will come very close to us actually being able to finish these books before the longing itself is finished. I'm still going to make an attempt for it. And here we have it, the never-ending notebook. Let the shade read this. Maybe he'll gain some wisdom for it and be less dull. I don't think the shade is that dull. He does, however, with his thoughts when he's walking around the caves. Some of the things he says, maybe he does need to read this. But that's weird. Would you read that line for line? I think that's the thing that they make people do in school to be punished, to make them write out the same words over and over, because that's the lesson in the writing of it. But are you even saying it internally, or are you just going through the motions? I'm pretty sure I just went through the motion. We turn the page, but it looks the same. I'm just turning pages for the fun of it. Yeah. all the same. Have fun, Shade. This will significantly have an impact on time. Actually, I'm going to go back to the beginning. This is because I'm curious how far the shade will go in 23 hours.